vibe, yeah, that's a vibe. It's a vibe, it's a vibe, that's a vibe, yeah.
Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga back up, bitch? Why you always trying to press a nigga? If it ain't one thing, it's the next, it starts to stress a nigga. This overthinking that you doing, it affects a nigga. Patience running thin with you for real, bitch, don't you test a nigga. Ain't never been the type to show no one affection, nigga. She don't trust me, say I'm the reason she don't mess with niggas. Calls me toxic cause I ain't with none of the extras, niggas. Pushing me away, bro, once I'm gone, you ain't gon' catch a nigga. I'm feeling boxed in, I need me some space. There ain't no turning back like TK, I'm doing the race. Forget the bitch, I bag the only thing I ever would chase. Thought you was coming with sight, your number getting erased. On to the next, you should've known how why the look on your face. Get the fuck from off my phone, it's best that you know your place. These years I'll never get them back, with you they go in the waste. Got what I wanted, now I'm skating and you getting Won't
replaced.
you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe?
That's a vibe, that's a vibe, that's a vibe, oh that's a vibe, yeah, that's a vibe. It's a vibe, it's a vibe, that's a vibe, yeah.
Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga back up, bitch? Why you always trying to press a nigga? If it ain't one thing, it's the next, it starts to stress a nigga. This overthinking that you doing, it affects a nigga. Patience running thin with you for real, bitch, don't you test a nigga. Ain't never been the type to show no one affection, nigga. She don't trust me, say I'm the reason she don't mess with niggas. Calls me toxic cause I ain't with none of the extras, niggas. Pushing me away, bro, once I'm gone, you ain't gon' catch a nigga. I'm feeling boxed in, I need me some space. There ain't no turning back like TK, I'm doing the race. Forget the bitch, I bag the only thing I ever would chase. Thought you was coming with sight, your number getting erased. On to the next, you should've known how why the look on your face. Get the fuck from off my phone, it's best that you know your place. These years I'll never get them back, with you they go in the waste. Got what I wanted, now I'm skating and you getting replaced. Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? You always worried about me, stressing over things you heard about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Always saying you're hurting about me, that's who I am, ain't nothing perfect about me. Won't you let a nigga breathe? Yeah. Spence. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the four in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? I don't know.
We are going to another episode of HardFoul Radio. Appreciate you guys all for tuning in. This is the show that values time, so let's get into it. So, I'm talking about all the divisions, and today's no different. We're going to break down the AFC North. We're going to go team by team. But sometimes when you do this stuff and you kind of have an idea in your mind, you're like, all right, cool, this is something to talk about. This is for anyone who's trying to create a video, create content, talk sports, kind of whatever it is you're interested in, right? You sit there and you start formulating in your head going, all right, this is my concept. Oh, I don't want to talk about this. Oh, I got an idea for that. Oh, it'd be cool if I see this. And then you realize as you start to put it all together, you'll usually make one or two decisions. You'll either go, this is really good, I like it, we're going to keep it. And that happens if you're an actual creator about 10% of the time, that you just like something start to finish through the process. That's just what happens, right? And then there's about 80% of the time where you're like, no, this isn't good enough. And a lot of that is based on people have their own self-doubt, how they feel people are going to take it. Maybe it's one of those things that you realize, oh, I'm really into this, but a lot of other people aren't. And so a lot of ideas die on that 80%. And then you get the other 10%, and this takes maturity. This is a very mature thing you have to come to. Maybe this thing that you're really interested in, maybe this thing that you're really passionate about, you don't really know. People tend to get upset, or they'll tell you, oh, you're not saying anything, if you come in and say, hey, I don't know. So a lot of us are scared to bring up an idea if we don't know something about it. And maybe, excuse me, but the reality should be, if you spend time thinking about something, investing in it, trying to put it together, and then at the end of all of that, you still don't know, that is an answer. Excuse me. And I think that's what I've come to think about the AFC North. I think the majority of divisions in football, most divisions have a clear winner. This is, you go throughout all of NFL history, most divisions have a clear winner. And for the most part, it's based off who's got the best quarterback, then best overall roster starts to kick in. And a lot of us are just biased, where it's either our favorite team or we go with what we know, the confirmation bias, which is who won the division last year, let's just throw them up. I don't think you can do that with the AFC North. This is, by most accounts, the toughest division in the NFL. The Ravens with MVP Lamar Jackson, the season they just came off of. The Bengals with Joe Burrow, we know what he's like when he's healthy. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin just doesn't have losing seasons, no matter who his quarterback is. And then the Browns, who, despite as long as I've been alive, essentially a dysfunctional franchise, still extremely talented roster with a quarterback that we just don't know about. A guy who was a great in this league, but hasn't been for a couple years, as well as some out the field stuff. And that's what, the more I started thinking about it, I think you could make an argument. I think this is the only division you can do it with. That I could go 1 through 4 and tell you, oh, this is how every single team wins the division. I can't do that. We've already done the AFC West and the East. I can't make a compelling case, even slightly, why the Patriots could win their division. I can't make a compelling case why the Raiders could win the AFC West. I could make an actual case that every single team in this division is good enough to win the division. And what makes it interesting with that is because it's normally when those situations come out, it's, oh, everybody's really, really close, either really, really good or really, really bad. And I think this division has a little bit of everything. I can make the case why everybody could win the division, and I think I could also make a compelling case why everybody could finish in last place. So let's start with the team that finished last year. It's the Browns. Well, the Browns speak for themselves. The Browns, even though people don't want to hear it, quite possibly have the best overall talent in the division. They do. There is an argument they have more talent than anybody else, any other roster in the division. They also have a former head coach of the year in Kevin Stefanski, a guy that got Baker Mayfield to the playoffs, a guy that was able to make things work even last year with all the dysfunction. So I got a great coach. I have to give credit to the general manager. If you look at the last couple of drafts that they've had, as well as free agency, the roster they've assembled, we know Myles Garrett, they have, excuse me, for a team that finished in last place, I could argue they have the best defensive player in the division, possibly the best defensive player in the conference or the NFL. Him and Chris Jones are kind of going neck and neck for that spot. There's a lot of reasons there to be like, oh yeah, this team, this should be who wins the division. This should be clearly the best team there. I work with a guy who's a Browns fan. I'm not saying this just to get on his good side, but that's how talented Cleveland is. Cleveland is also cursed with, and I used to never believe in this stuff growing up, some franchises are just dysfunctional from their very core. It doesn't matter how many good players you have. It doesn't matter how good your coaching staff is. Because these are all businesses, some of these organizations are just dysfunctional at their very core. And maybe nobody worse than the Cleveland Browns. My entire life, child and adult life, the Browns and Lions have basically been the bottom parts of each conference. The Browns, the worst team in the AFC, the Lions, the worst team in the NFC. That's why it's been so resounding seeing the Lions put it together, not just with their coaching, not just with their players on the field, but the franchise as a whole, from ownership, executives, the business of the Detroit Lions. We've seen the reform. And you can tell because both have really good rosters right now. Both the Browns and the Lions probably have top 3 rosters in their respective conferences. But the Browns still have that dysfunctional spirit from their core, from management to ownership. It just hasn't quite clicked the same way it has for the Lions. Could they win the division? I absolutely believe they could. Because if the freaky man has a bounce-back season at quarterback, they have Myles Garrett, this roster. Kevin Stefanski is a coach who's probably the best head coach that we don't really acknowledge in that space of the great head coaches. We don't put him up there with McVay or Shanahan. The Browns have everything that if they were in any other division and they weren't the Browns and didn't have this stigma or just lifelong dysfunction going on, you would say that's a team that could compete for a Super Bowl. You got receivers, tight ends, defensive guys, a good offensive line. Like, they have everything. And they even got a quarterback who financially is paid like, we've been talking about this last 2 weeks, paid like one of the 5 best in the sport, or now 6th, 7th best. Everybody getting paid nowadays. So yes, the Browns could finish first in this division. They could finish last. Let's go with the Steelers. I have no idea how Mike Tomlin does this. Let me be very clear. And I do think there's something here where Mike is just, he's, for a guy to never have a losing season. And be clear, I somewhat think this has changed. He has changed his own narrative, and this is to his credit. At one point, the Steelers were basically a championship or bust, or a championship striving organization. They won. There's a reason why they've got the most championships in the AFC besides, they're tied with Brady. Both got 6, right? It's insane when you're just tied with a singular player. But still, and the Chiefs are obviously catching up. So that was their standard. And I do think there is something to it. Has the standard fallen because that's all we judge Mike Tomlin off of? I think there's some validity there. I also think not being able to just totally sink, even in seasons where Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett, some of these guys that have played quarterback for the Steelers, those would get most guys fired. And Mike Tomlin continues to either have, at very worst, a 500 record, stay relevant. So now, how could they win the division? What if, now this is probably the most hypothetical and probably the least convincing take, but Mike Tomlin has proven himself at such a consistent level with mediocre talent at the most important position in the sport that what if Russ is the Russ Denver had last year, which wasn't great, don't get me wrong. Trust me, I watched them. Wasn't great, but it was far better than what they had last year in Pittsburgh. What if Justin Fields beats out Russ in camp? And what if Justin Fields finally puts it together? So if Pittsburgh has, we know they have a great defense led by TJ Watt and Mika Fitzpatrick. And what if their quarterbacks figure it out with receivers? The Steelers have drafted, developed, and produced receivers better than any team, any organization in the sport the last 20 plus years. Go down the line. They just do it. Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown, like they just Juju Smith-Schuster we thought was, remember Juju Smith-Schuster, you can think whatever you want of him now, but when he first came in the league and Sunday Night Football, I forget which team was against, but he had that big touchdown run up the middle or catch and run up the middle, he looked like another future Steelers superstar. So it doesn't really matter who they have a receiver, this organization just gets it when it comes to receivers. Some organizations just have that. And if they get good, and check out Najee Harris, if you have good to great play at the quarterback position, which, again, this is probably the biggest stretch, but this is where their season's going to live and die, that's what's going to, can that take them to first place in this division? Now, last place, I think they should finish last place the last 3 or 4 years, because I have no idea how they're not. I have no idea how they're not with combinations of the Mason Rudolph season, old Ben Roethlisberger, Kenny Pickett. I have no idea this team's ever finished in last place. So maybe they're the biggest hypothetical to finish. They're probably the greatest lock to just finish third. Just get another 9-8 season and call it a day. No, that's what they do. But I have now defensive talent, a potential huge swing at quarterback, considering how that's all we hear about the Jets. Like, if we want to use that logic for the Jets of how much better they should be this year with Rodgers versus last year, because look how bad their quarterback play was. Well, then that should also be valid for other teams, like I talked about Denver yesterday. I'm talking about Pittsburgh today. If their swing, which means, you don't have to have Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar, Allen, but if you were so bad one year, now you swing up high the next year because your guy is competent. He gets you 3,500 to 4,000 yards. Both of these quarterbacks are mobile. They get you some rushing touchdowns. You've already solidified, and you have the exact opposite of the Browns culture, which is you are one of the most functional organizations in the history of the sport, if not the most functional. 3 head coaches in however many years. Like, they are the standard of a business and a model in the NFL, unlike the Browns. So the Pittsburgh could finish first, could finish last. Let's go with the Bengals. Joe Burrow, who we've all heard the numbers. Joe Burrow, when he's healthy, they make the AFC Championship game. When he's hurt, he's hurt. And that, again, which I think is almost taken away from how good the rest of the franchise has secretly gotten, because they weren't uncompetitive without Joe Burrow last year. They weren't some 3-17 or 3-14 doormat post him playing. They didn't look like the worst team in the NFL. They were competent, but you can see how big of a difference he makes because he takes them from competent to one of the 3 or 4 Super Bowl favorites. That's how good he is on any given Sunday. So the easy answer for the Bengals, if Joe Burrow's healthy, they have every right to assume the division is theirs. And in that same regard, and they're the most boring one to talk about, I apologize, if Joe Burrow isn't healthy, what do? Same thing as last year. Like I said, they do have guys. Chase, depending on when Joe Burrow gets potentially, if he were to get hurt, that could impact T. Higgins being traded. Obviously, if it's early in the season, then they're more likely to trade him versus if it's late in the season, they're not going to trade him if he's still there post-trade deadline. But the Bengals season is as simple as, and I said, I don't think they're going to totally tank or be awful just because he's not there. But if Joe Burrow's there, they have every chance to win the division. And if he's not there, especially early on, then they have every chance to finish last place. And remember, this is the best division in the sport. This is an extremely competitive division. So saying they're finishing last in their division is not the same as how I called the Patriots. And I think the Patriots might only be a 3 to 5 win team. That's not what I said about the Raiders, who might only be a 3 to 5 win team. This team could still be 6 to 8 wins, competitive with or without Burrow if he gets hurt. And they could be a 12, 13 win team if Burrow's healthy the entire season. He's just that good, and because of the roster setup, he's just that polarizing for him. And last, the reigning MVP and division winner, number 1 seed, Baltimore Ravens. Can you do it again? So, I don't think Lamar has the same reputation as Joe, as far in either way, both good or bad. I don't think Lamar gets the credit he should for being in that right after Mahomes tier. Like, Mahomes is in the tier by himself, cool. But right after Mahomes should be Lamar, Allen, Burrow. And I don't think Lamar gets the respect he deserves for being solidified in that tier as a 2-time MVP. But Lamar also does not get the same injury rep that Burrow has. Now, his stints aren't for as long. He's not getting hurt for as long. But 2 years ago, Lamar got hurt towards the end of the season, never came back. There was conversation, was it about the contract? But Lamar only played 12 games back-to-back seasons. He didn't get over 3,000 passing yards or 20 passing touchdowns either of those 2 seasons. And in the middle of them are his MVP years. So we know, while it's not the same, we don't view it the same volatility as Burrow, who we've seen miss 8, 9, 10 games in a row or almost an entire season. But Lamar he has MVP history, which he should be talked about and celebrated for, but he also does have somewhat of an injury history. And because they're very infrequent over his career, like I said, he's not missing multiple games in a row besides that stretch a couple years ago, but there is an injury factor. There's always going to be an injury factor, just considering that he runs. I understand he's been very good his entire career not taking the big hit, but there's always an injury risk when you have a mobile quarterback. And because his MVP seasons are so vastly different from his non-MVP seasons, it's an entirely different offense for the Ravens. It's basically an entirely different team. Now, we talked about, can they just run the ball more? Because all of us Twitter experts came together and said the Ravens didn't run the ball enough against the Chiefs. And that might be true. And while I feel that way, that's not the only difference between them and the Chiefs. Because their entire roster, which I believe it has the potential to be, is better than Kansas City's top to bottom. We're going to get into that in a little bit with the top 100 list. But Lamar, the roster has to make up that difference because Lamar is in the tier below Mahomes. And that's fine. That's not being disrespectful. That's just Mahomes has separated himself from the competition and anyone actively playing. So, could they win the division? Yes, because Lamar could put up, and I don't think he'll get another MVP because I think voters will, unless he does something crazy like throw for 55 touchdowns, I don't think they'll give him another MVP because there's just, and I think this is stupid, but the idea that if you win MVP and don't win the Super Bowl, or the NBA title, you should be invalid from winning it the next year, and that's pretty dumb, but neither here nor there. I don't think he's going to be able to get the award, but he could have a similar or equivalent season. And the Ravens as a whole are also injury prone, partly due to the style they play. Now, I know everybody could get injured, and I know that's always a possibility for any team, but the Ravens, go look at the last couple years in Baltimore. And Tony's a huge Ravens fan. When they get injured, it comes in waves. Because the style that they play is super physical. They run the ball more than anybody, especially this year. You got to imagine they're going to run the ball even more because of Derrick Henry. And the same way the Niners in the NFC kind of beat up teams week after week, and the Niners just happen to have, I don't know, maybe it's, I never like to blame an athlete for their injuries just because it's a violent sport. But the Niners seem to have superhumans who don't miss that much time but play this super brand of physical football. The Ravens, everybody's superhuman one year, and then the next year, they're missing games. Ronnie Stanley's missed games. Like, they've had other linemen miss games. They've had defensive guys miss games. And so there's a real injury factor here based on stylistically how the Ravens play, more so than other teams. So, yeah, could they finish first in the division? Easily. They could almost just repeat what they did last year. Slightly different, I understand. OBJ's not there anymore, but I don't think that's going to be a huge loss. But they could absolutely rewind last season, or they could look like 2 seasons ago. So the AFC North is just weird to me. I don't have these really confident opinions on, oh yeah, they're for sure going to be this, they're for sure going to be that. I did my research, I took my time, and I am mature enough to come in here and say, hey, I just don't know. You're going to have to see that stuff play out. What's going to make or break this division most likely is which OC has that game plan against that defense in a pivotal Week 13 game. Which defensive coordinator can put together that game plan for that offense in a Week 10 divisional game? Who's going to make that one big play? This division could be as simple as a jump ball that Jamar Chase wins over Marlon Humphrey, or vice versa. Like, that's how close I believe this division can truly be, and we're not going to really know, so I'm not going to sit here and act like holier than thou or smarter than anybody and say, oh, this is definitively how the AFC North is going to shape up. Let's switch there to a team we talked about yesterday. And I didn't want to talk about this, and I've been trying my hardest to just avoid the NFL Top 100 list. I don't think it really ever matters. It's weird. The guys don't actually vote at the very end of the season, so you get this weird mix of, if a guy finishes really strong and we want to elevate him for that, like a Jordan Love last year, who was already playing well by November, but really like put it on together at the very end of the season, we don't quite get that, right? Like, that's not totally taken into account. And then sometimes, like, these guys, you could tell, like, the clip came out for Jamar Chase where he's like, look, man, I'm putting Joe Burrow 1 because I'm not putting that other guy there. I'm salty. So there's already the fact of guys are making personalized decisions. This isn't a very hard, concrete, analytic list, right? So there's a lot of things wrong with the NFL Top 100 list. And then I saw this, and I saw a couple shows that I enjoy pick up on this. The Kansas City Chiefs don't have anybody 100 through 10. Okay? Now, we all know Mahomes is going to be 1. Kelsey's probably going to be in the back half of the top 10, probably 8, 9, or 10, which is insane considering where his season was going and how it ended. Even it was his least productive season in the Mahomes era. I understand they still won a Super Bowl, but to the winners, the spoils, fine. And then Chris Jones will probably be, I would say, 4 or 5. He's probably going to be in that area, right? They could really fuck it up and just give Lamar 1 again. You know, give people something to talk about. He was the MVP last year, just saying. But then there's the couple of shows and these other radio people talking about, oh, see, this is how great Mahomes is. He's elevating the Chiefs. They don't even really have that much talent. Time out. Time out. This is the other side of being appreciated and validated. And that is, you will take credit away from other players. That Peyton Manning Colts run, we knew about 4 guys consistently. We knew Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, and Dwight Freeney. That was it. And it wasn't this situation where, oh, you know, they just couldn't afford other guys or they didn't have other great players on the team during runs. Obviously, Bob Sanders had a run, maybe while it was short. They had some good linebackers. They had other good rush ends. They had Dallas Clark. But basically, 4 guys got credit. Let's look at New England's dynasty. Which, want to compare dynasty to dynasty. Yeah, there's other notable players. Welker, Edelman, Gronk. But when people were discussing who gets the most credit for this dynasty, it was Brady and it was Bellicheck. When you have these potentially greatest ever at what they do, and they are so polarizing, they take the room, they're going to take away that attention from other guys. So it doesn't matter if you have a L'Jarius Sneed or Trent McDuffie, who probably should have been on the list and had great seasons respectively, and L'Jarius Sneed got paid from the Titans. No one's going to look back on this Chiefs run and go, you know what? I don't think they win that title without L'Jarius Sneed. Even if it's true, the core of Kansas City is going to get the most credit, and that's Mahomes, that's Jones, that's Kelsey, even if his production is down, and that's Andy Reid as the coach. That's who's going to get the credit. That's why when you see Reid at number 1 for head coaching spots, and it's like, oh, best head coach in the NFL, if Steve Spagnuolo didn't have the story attached to him of beating the 17-0 New England Patriots, we wouldn't talk about anybody on Kansas City staff, because Andy Reid would get so much of the credit. He would envelop the room. He would take out the oxygen, whatever expression you want to use, and that's who would get credited. That's who would get the love. That's who would get the respect, the accolades. Manning, Harrison, Wayne, Freeney, they did that with Indianapolis. And Bob Sanders won the Defensive Player of the Year award while he was in Indianapolis. And while it's a cool story, when you think of the Colts run, you are going to think of those 4 guys. When you think of the Patriots, you're going to think of Brady and Bill. That credit, you can't split that so many ways. So, and when I saw these other people going on TV or on YouTube and talking about like, oh, the Chiefs are being disrespected, they don't have enough guys. No, you are being respected and you are being given, if you want to be given this title of a dynasty. And Mahomes, greatest we've ever seen. He doesn't quite have the accolades of Brady, but greatest we've ever seen. Kelsey, greatest tight end. Chris Jones. If Aaron Donald didn't play, how great is he compared to the rest of the field? If they're going to get those high of accolades, then you're going to take them from everybody else, because you're not going to acknowledge if you had a good pass rush if Chris Jones is on your line. You're not going to acknowledge that you have other good tight ends if you have Kelsey. You're not going to acknowledge all of your coaching staff if you have Reid. So don't give me this. I'm okay to be the Chiefs hater, right? I said yesterday they're almost impossible to really talk negatively about, because when you are the running dynasty, you have the respect and you have the cachet to say, look, we're betting everybody. What we do works. We're right. You're wrong. And that's fine. You win. You get that. But when it comes to stuff like this, don't cry and complain, because if I'm going to call Mahomes the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, guess what? I'm not giving his receivers the same credit. I'm not giving his O-line the same credit. That's just the facts. And the best example is, before we go to break here, look at San Francisco, who I've been saying, that's the best roster in the sport. And the majority of people, it's kind of funny, most fans never agree on best roster. Like, just normally you always say, no, my team's better. Cool. They are almost unanimously agreed upon as the best roster in the sport, because we don't give their quarterback any credit. Because we all want to say, well, Purdy's not that good. He's carried this, that, and the third. So because we are demeaning him, we are uplifting McCaffrey, Kittle, Trent Williams. And that's fine. I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just saying, if you want all of these accolades, you want all this praise, you want this attention, it is going to take it from other people. That's just the reality. So don't come crying, Kansas City fans, because we don't have enough guys. The Niners have 7 guys in the top 30. We've only got 3 guys in the top 10 and nobody else on the list. That's your reality. Deal with it. That in the NFL top 100 list just sucks anyway, man. Look, it's like I said, I didn't really want to talk about it, but here we are. I will be the Kansas City hater. I will eat that. I'm okay with that. Let me be the Kansas City hater. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to talk about the NFL is a business, and all businesses, no matter what, you've got to be involved in marketing, selling yourself to your consumers, your fan base, and nothing is a better marketing tool than training camp, and specifically training camp videos. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily.
Yeah. Spence. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the 4 with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the foe in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? I don't know.
Thank you, David Griffin. So the Pelicans acquired DeJounte Murray from the Hawks. While I am sad to see Larry Nance go, he was an emotional leader for the second unit. The reality is a potential starting lineup with Murray, Herb Jones, B.I., hopefully resigns, Zion, probably throw the rookie in there to start because you need a big, and it's another guy who's not going to demand a lot of shots, similar to Herb Jones. Then off the bench, potentially, if he's willing to accept it, C.J. McCollum, Trey Murphy, Jordan Hawkins, Jose Alvarado. Yeah, you're not going to necessarily be big, and so you're going to need one more, maybe just another 7-footer on the roster as far as some bulk and some size. Don't just get out rebounded every game. But length, skill, athleticism, shooting, Pelicans pull this off, and if Willie Green is really that guy as a head coach, that's a top 4 seed, potentially top 2 seed in the Western Conference. Thank you. And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today. So, the NFL is a business. Talked about this before on the break. And when you're in business, you have to market, you've got to advertise, all that stuff. And while the common fan doesn't probably think too much of training camp, I think honestly we like to see the tweets of, how many more days until we get to see Scott Hansen, how many more days until the Hall of Fame game. Like, we just really want football. And so you don't really care about the ins and outs like a football nerd would when it comes to training camps. But we do start, and the common fan does start to obsess over these training camp videos. And they become talking points for shows because people still refuse to talk about baseball as it continues to decline into oblivion. And these shows will start talking about it, and they'll almost convince you that, oh yeah, training camp really, really matters. See, I saw a segment today. Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions at training camp. Does that mean you're losing confidence in him? Look, you got to market. When you market something, you're marketing one of 2 ways. You are either trying to market to show or advertise to show our product is the best. Good example of this, look at what the rookie quarterbacks are coming out with. Look at all the stories. Colin Cowherd said this once, and I firmly believe it. Stuff doesn't come out unless you want it to, right? And while, yes, there is cameras of there's people who are there and they can take videos of it, but the ones that really get circulating, not to say that there's not, a big media machine or nothing like that, the ones that these teams are circulating about their rookie quarterbacks are all positive. Go down the list. Bo Nix, they're telling you, getting better every day in practice. Oh, and his leadership, man. His leadership is something crazy. We ain't ever seen it like that for such a quarterback so young. He's the same guy day in, day out. Ooh, look at this throw to the back of the end zone to Greg Dulcich. Ooh, look at this throw down the sideline to Marvin Mims. Been watching Broncos live every day. Go on Twitter, Sean Payne tells me 10 things and tells me nothing. Says 10 things, tells me nothing. J.J. McCarthy. They're trying to put out stuff on him. Drake May, who they're like, hey, he might not even start right away. But man, look at this 50-yard bomb he just threw. They're doing this with everybody. Caleb Williams, look at the throws he's making. And then they have a story out about, he told the locker room we need to clean up the trash. And that's to, once again, we're trying to promote this. We want you guys to be excited to buy our product. We want you guys to be excited to come and watch this young quarterback play, even if they don't, Drake May and Michael Penix. They also don't want you to think, what happens if we picked the wrong guy? So they are going to market to you and they are going to advertise to you, you being the fan, the consumer. We picked the right guy. He's going to be great and you're going to love spending your money on him. I mean, watching the game. You're going to love it. On top of when then you see these other things that come out, it's like, well, not everything that comes out is positive. You're right. Well, what's the story that I just made fun of 30 seconds ago? Brock Purdy throws 4 interceptions. Starts 7 for 7, but that wasn't that wasn't the story. I couldn't say he was doing 7 to 7, ended shaky. Throws 4 interceptions in practice. One day, a team is going to, and it could be the Niners, is going to say, we think our quarterback is just good to average. We'd like to pay him good to average. And if he declines, we are okay releasing him. We are okay saying, go find it somewhere else. Go find another team that can give you George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. That will happen one day. And that might happen with the Niners. And if it is, the Niners are putting out the messaging, hey, even if we don't re-sign him, I know we've been to a couple Super Bowls in the NFC Championship game, or been to a Super Bowl in an NFC Championship game, but this guy might not be he might not be it long term. We just want you guys to know, might not be it. But look, we're gonna put out the video. We're gonna be transparent. Nothing's transparent. Nothing's transparent about it, man. The idea that the Niners, the Broncos, the Patriots, any team in the league, when they're putting out these clips, and sometimes we fall for it. I am at risk of falling for the Chiefs one, which is the fights, the Kadarius Toney hit, Travis Kelce over the last couple years getting into it with multiple teammates. Maybe they're trying to propaganda and put out a message to go, look, man, maybe we're not quite what you think. Maybe you guys do think you have a chance. And the whole time they got 15 and they're going to bust your ass anyway. So all of these stories that are coming out, all of these videos, all these clips, especially from the official team Twitters, team accounts, these are all plans to market, to advertise, to get you to start thinking the way they want you to. And it's a business. They all do it. Walmart does it. Target does it. Your favorite influencer does it. Everybody does it. It's all business. Now, what's smart business, I love what the Bears are doing. So DJ Moore and the Bears just signed 4 years, $110 million. It's $27.5 million a year. Yeah, 4 years, 110. And I love this. We are seeing Chicago grow up in front of our eyes. It's great. Chicago has Ryan Pace at GM, and he's not making irrational moves. He's not making moves to save his job. He is just knocking out the smart and correct move. Boom, boom, boom. I said Howie Roseman is writing the book on how to GM an NFL team. And I know for a fact, at least Ryan Pace bought the book. Maybe he downloaded it illegally. Never know anymore. But he read the book and he said, oh, that's what you guys do to keep all this talent. Because he's now aware, look, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. Because he's got what people already consider a good roster, and now you're inserting a generational quarterback who, you know, if he's as good as advertised, you will have to pay this guy a lot of money. So how do you pay Caleb Williams a lot of money in 3 to 4 years and still keep talent around him? Well, you get a mix of, you have to have, and some of the Eagles do really, really well, and that's why I think what Ryan Pace is doing is so brilliant in Chicago. Let's just take the receiver room. 3 generations of receiver, basically. You have Rome Odunze, who's a rookie, DJ Moore, who's in his prime, and Keenan Allen, who's on the back end. Well, Odunze's on a rookie contract. Cool, he's taken care of. Let's get DJ Moore paid the right way. Let's show to the remaining players in the locker room, hey, if you perform, we will pay you. Him and Sweat, they did this with last year. He wasn't obviously their homegrown guy, but technically neither was DJ Moore. We're going to pay you, and we're going to pay you early, so that way it gives the players this, oh, okay, cool, I can get paid, and I can get paid early. I don't have to play out and risk everything just to get a payday. And because Moore wasn't set to be a free agent until after 2025, this 4-year deal, they now have 6 years to pay him. So remember we talked about Howie Roseman. Pay your guys early. We'll see if Ryan Pace is willing to commit to the second half of this, which is be willing to cut your losses. Because you've paid guys early, because you've structured your salary cap in a way, because you've done this smartly, you can pay a guy over 6 years, 7 years, meaning if you have to cut someone, you can move money around to make it work, take one bad year against the cap, and call it a day. So we're going to pay DJ Moore, and then they're just finishing out Keenan Allen's contract, and he's on the back end of his career, so you know you don't have to worry about another lucrative contract for him. That's incredibly smart. And this is a guy, this takes an incredible amount of maturity, and maturity does not just stop because you become an adult, does not just stop because you hit 21, does not stop just because you hit 30. We are constantly all maturing throughout life. And Ryan Pace is making a very mature decision because a lot of guys could panic. A lot of guys could go, oh my gosh, I have Caleb Williams, okay, I've got DJ Moore, okay, I need to just start. Everything needs to be right now. I need to make sure I take advantage of this quarterback contract because otherwise they're going to look at me funny. And you could panic yourself into making all the wrong decisions. And he's not doing that. He's doing this incredibly smart. He's doing this incredibly resourceful. That's a wonderful contract for DJ Moore. That's a wonderful contract for Montez Sweat. The trade for Montez Sweat, the trade for Moore, that whole trade with Carolina. Look how well that's turned out for him. That's not a GM in a panic. That's not a GM with lack of control. That is a GM who knows what he's doing, making the right decisions. This is reading the Howie Roseman playbook, and you're executing it perfectly. Again, we will see. Are they willing to commit to the other side of this, which is, hey, we made a mistake, cut off the mistake, boom, keep it going. That we won't know until we've got actual examples. But so far, what Ryan Pace is doing, Caleb, that whole trade with Carolina, excuse me, the DJ Moore deal, this is all setting up for Chicago to be one of the best franchises for the next 10 to 15 years. So, congrats to Ryan Pace. Congrats to the Bears. There you go, Will. I said something nice about the Bears. Maybe y'all could return the favor one day. I say really nice. I've said nice things about Baltimore and the Bears this episode, and Will and Tony is still going to drag Denver. It's okay. I get it. We're going to take another quick break here. When we come back, we're going to start breaking down the AFC North, the trickiest division. Who comes in at 4? Who comes in at 1? I said they've all got a case for it. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily.
Yeah. It's facts. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the 4 in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the 4 in my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? I don't know.
At number 9, Caleb Williams. Funny enough, he has one of Justin Herbert's old weapons in Keenan Allen. If you look at what the Bears did, and I don't like hyperbole statements, but this is This is one that works, which is Caleb Williams probably has the best situation for a number 1 overall pick in NFL history. At number 4, this is the one we're probably all a little too high on, but it's okay. I am drinking the Kool-Aid, and that is C.J. Stroud with the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans, C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, just how we always say, or we've been saying since this era of rookie quarterbacks, when guys play right away, you pretty much know right off the bat. Which leaves us with number 1, and I know it's the best situation because most people don't even think the quarterback's all that good or And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. So we're going to break down the AFC North team by team here. I'm not going to give this division how I've been ranking the other ones, where either studs, building, celebrating, and or living. And that's because, like I said, to start the show, I think it's the hardest division to rank because it's the weirdest division to rank because all of these teams could theoretically finish last and all these teams could theoretically finish first. But we're going to start with the team that I think is going to finish last, and these are my least confident picks, my least confident division out of everybody in the NFL. So just hang in there with me. At number 4, I'm going against the grain. I have no idea how the Steelers don't finish last, man. I know that theoretically it's such an incredible accomplishment what Tomlin has done over the length of his career. But at some point, especially, and maybe I'm being a little biased here because I do think Russ is going to start the first 7-8 games and suck it up. Russ isn't there anymore. I like Fields, but I just don't think he's ever going to really be there or be that guy for an NFL team. How many, like, is TJ Watt going to get you 30 sacks? Is TJ Watt going to have 5 defensive touchdowns? Is Minka Fitzpatrick going to get 8 interceptions? I understand they do it, and I know they do it year in, year out. But the Steelers feel more like a magic trick, something we don't quite understand, but it just happens, and we all just accept it, than they do obviously not a dominant team, and most times don't even feel like a really good team. There's always that one game every single weekend that you look at, and you're like, ugh, how did that happen? Maybe it's an upset, or the score's weird, or you just, if you're a West Coast person and you went out partying Saturday night, you just wake up Sunday around 11:30 noon and you're like, wait, what? And it doesn't make any sense to you. The Steelers are that game pretty much every single week. And while it has obviously worked relatively up to this point, all the non-consecutive, non-losing seasons, at some point that shit has to stop. At some point, the Steelers will have a losing season. Now, that's not just trying to be negative or a critic. The reality is they will lose at some point. They have done such a good job of avoiding it, which you could argue long-term, if you're into the analytics side of it, is worse. There's a lot of people that believe you should bottom out and then, get high in the draft picks and then rebuild yourself that way. And that's not quite the Steeler way, nor have they necessarily had to, but at some point, this team is going to lose. At some point, Mike Tomlin he can't keep doing this, right? Like, he just can't keep making duct tape and glue and sticks and confetti and all this shit just come together and be a winning football team. And I don't know, maybe I'm jealous because my team sucked for 7 years in a row, and I'm like, these motherfuckers can't ever just suck once. So it's to me, there's normal rules with every division winner or really just every NFL team, which is if you want to win your division, you either have to have the best quarterback, the best roster, Sometimes you could do it if you have the best defense. It's more of an old school thing just because the way the rules are now, it's much harder to do that. Obviously, the Steelers early in Big Ben's career, they were able to do that. Just have this overwhelming, dominating defense that wasn't giving up more than 2 touchdowns and just, doing it that way. But you can't not have any of those things. You can't be the worst. You can't be worse at quarterback than everybody else in your division. And the freaky guy's kind of a wild card, but if the freaky guy's back to even playing semi to what he used to be at, he's neither Russell Wilson or Justin Fields is as good as him. You can't have your O-line, like the roster, while it's a good roster, it's not better than Cleveland, it's not better than Baltimore, it's not better than Cincinnati with a healthy Joe Burrow. So you don't have the roster, you don't have the quarterback, and you could even make an argument coach-wise. Again, Tomlin never has a losing season, and that's wonderful. John Harbaugh also has a Super Bowl, and he's had more success the last 5 to 6 years than Tomlin has. Zach Taylor's been to a Super Bowl and has had more success, division wins, division titles, playoff wins the last several seasons than Tomlin. Stefanski has a Head Coach of the Year award more recent than Tomlin. Doesn't have a Super Bowl, but Tomlin's Super Bowl is over a decade old. Like, at what point are we going to really sit there and go, oh, so you don't have the best head coach, you clearly don't have the best quarterback, you don't have the best roster, and there's an argument you might have the worst, and it's probably easier to argue you have the worst in all 3 of those things than it is to argue you have the best. And again, I know it sounds weird because Pittsburgh has been so consistent, and consistent is the term, so overly consistent most of our entire lives. Again, 3 coaches in 60, 70 years, whatever it is, there's a reason for that. But Tomlin's, I can make a real easy argument he's not better than Harbaugh right now or even better than Taylor. You're going to make an argument he's on the wrong side of the ball. Most brilliant minds of today's game is on offense. There's very few great defensive head coaches, period, and very few defensive head coaches. I think it was only him, and then I think Sean McDermott was the only one that made, or Sean McDermott and Todd Bowles were the only 2 that made the playoffs last year for head coaches on the defensive side. So I get it. I'm not predicting the Steelers, as weird as this sounds, just because, the biggest lock in the NFL, if you went back 8 years or 10 years, whatever, the 15 years Mike Tomlin's been there, the biggest lock in the NFL, if you bet it, would be Steelers no losing seasons next 15 years. But it's got to stop at some point, man. You don't have it as a coach. You don't have it as a roster. You don't have it at quarterback. All these things can't run into. Yes, TJ Watt is great. Yes, their defense will be good. But so the Browns have a great defense, and Myles Garrett might even be better. The Ravens have a great defense, and they have an MVP at quarterback. The Bengals have a surprisingly good defense, and they have a Super Bowl, a guy who's an MVP caliber guy who's gotten them to a Super Bowl, maybe the best quarterback not named Mahomes. 2 of the best quarterbacks not named Mahomes are in your division. It's got to stop at some point, man. Pittsburgh, number 4. At 3, and I tried so hard to like this team. They were doing so many things right. And I think they just have too much talent to not finish at least ahead of Pittsburgh. It's the Browns. They got to be number 3, man. A lot of the same conversations you can have about Pittsburgh, you could have about Cleveland in comparison to Baltimore and Cincinnati. Yes, Watson's not as good as Freaky Man's not as good as Baltimore with Lamar Jackson or as Joe Burrow. But he's obviously better than Russ or Justin Fields. The Browns' defense may be one of the best 2 or 3 units in the league. And at one point, I think last year before their San Francisco game, I think they were number 1 in the league. They were number 1 all-time yards per play. Now, they didn't finish there, but the first half of the season, they were some monsters. And Myles Garrett is obviously one of the best defensive players in the entire world. With no Aaron Donald, as due to retirement, he has a claim to be the best defensive player in the world. They have receivers, Amari Cooper, who they just restructured. Like, they're even doing good things from a franchise perspective. I just can't take... Like, everything feels like they should be it. But I just don't think, not only the off-the-field stuff, I just don't think Freaky Man has it anymore. And that's Cleveland's biggest problem. And that's their biggest issue. It's not that they can't compete. It's not that they shouldn't compete, because they should. They can. But I think everything else about this roster, if I was Cleveland, and you never want to wish for this, I'm going to knock on wood. I think Cleveland, and I think it showed with the Joe Flacco situation last year. That's how talented they were, that Joe Flacco could come off the bench and he could still lead them to the playoffs. I think Cleveland would be better off with a average quarterback. If a guy you just knew was going to be average, because we don't know what this guy is going to be anymore. He's years removed from being a Pro Bowler, All-Pro type player. He's years removed from being the next great young quarterback. That's how you got to realize there was a scenario that was playing out in real time, and then it finished this way, where Freaky Man was gonna beat Mahomes, and he might have started off his own career-defining legacy, was up 24-0 on Patrick Mahomes, and then loses the playoff game. And since then, you can exclude even all the off-the-field stuff. Since then, he has not been the same player. So yes, you got receivers, you got tight ends, you got a good O-line, you got Myles Garrett, a great defense, all this stuff. But I just don't trust you a quarterback. I trust you more than Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh, I think, has far more issues and a less good roster overall. But I just can't trust you a quarterback, man. So, Cleveland, again, I'm going to see my Browns fans later tonight. Cleveland, I got to put you number 3, man. We're going to take one last break, and we're going to break down the final 2 teams. You know who they are. Let's see what the order is. This is HardFoul Radio. We'll be back momentarily.
Yeah. Respect. Nigga, where am I going? Drop the 4 with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? Drop the 4 with my cup, now I'm floating. I can't feel a thing, to be real, I just go through the motions. Where am I going? Nigga, I'm in deep like the ocean. I've been in my bag, everybody around me, I'm ghosting. Where am I going? I don't know.
I'm curious to see, and this isn't really the week to be talking about this kind of thing, but like I'm curious to see. I think Naruto ended a long time ago, right?
That's valid. Yeah. Almost 10 years now?
Yeah, Naruto ended a long time ago. The Boruto anime is stalled. I think there are a lot of people online that, and I think Dragon Ball follows this same thing. I think a lot of people online got a lot of clout from and made like careers off of
Those
Naruto
series,
predictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really intrigued to see what happens when people that have been doing this with, that have been doing this with One Piece for a long ass time, like Grand Line review.
Mm-hmm.
What else are you going to review? The Grand Line.
He does Hunter x Hunter. That can never fail him.
Yeah, I mean he'll get a chapter every year then. Huh?
And we are back. This is HardFoul Radio. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. I got 2 teams left in the AFC North. Sorry, Tony. At number 2, Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens could do almost everything they did last year, and I don't think it's going to be quite enough or quite the same, especially with A, your schedule's going to be harder, B, you are banking on, like Lamar's never had, if like I said, you look at his MVP season, look what he did the year afterwards, there was a clear drop-off. Some of that is injury, but Lamar has while not the same, as we discussed earlier, not quite the same history as Burrow when it comes to being injured for long stretches of times. We've seen him get nicked. We've seen him get bruised. We've seen him sit out. Like, that stuff is totally on the board. I also think this is not so much a detriment to Baltimore, which is why I said they could do almost everything they did last year. It's just not quite enough. This is more of a letter to Burrow and a letter to the Bengals for how good I think they could be. I think Baltimore's great. I think Baltimore's going to have a top 7 to 10-ish defense. I think Baltimore's going to have a top 10 offense, top 10 defense. And they might be the only team in the NFL besides the Niners that's going to be able to boast that. Top 10 offense, top 10 defense. You got an MVP at quarterback. You have multiple guys who are going to be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations throughout their career. Hamilton, Queen. You have Marlon Humphrey, who's one of the best corners as long as he's healthy. There's a lot to like about Baltimore. And I also think Baltimore is going to do some, and I hate this term, I think they know they're good enough and great enough where I think they're going to take some weeks to practice. There's a very famous guy on TV who said the Chiefs did this most of last year, and I think the Ravens are going to try it. And so while I do love, when we get into the NFL part of the season, we get closer to it, I do love Baltimore week 1 versus Kansas City. I think Baltimore is going to pull out all the stops. I think they're going to go crazy. And Kansas City, if there's any time to get them, it is week 1. They do traditionally start a little slower as far as how well they look, especially the last couple of years. With Tyreek, they started off crazy, but that was because Tyreek's just really, you can't train for a Tyreek Hill. And for that same reason, you can't train for a Lamar Jackson. So even though they won, him coming into the season, to see that speed in real time again when you've had several months off, you've had all the issues, both training camp, off the field, all these other things. Like I said, I'm sticking with, I will be the Kansas City hater. I promise you I will do it. I can do it. I really love Baltimore week 1. I think Baltimore is going to try to figure out, I think they believe they are better than everybody else besides the Chiefs. Because remember, they even went to San Francisco and they smacked San Francisco around. So I don't think they fear the Niners. I don't think they fear the Lions. They beat the Lions. Remember what they were doing to NFC teams last year? Like, remember how they stomped the Lions, stomped the Niners? They were beating up everybody from the NFC. I don't think they fear them at all. I think there's one team they're trying to beat, and I think you're going to see an explosive game plan week 1, and then I think you are going to see a team that, and this could backfire because we've seen this before. I think other teams have tried this, where you gear up to beat one team trying to beat the Chiefs, and then it screws you over in other departments. Because since you tried so hard to beat the Chiefs, maybe you run into the Bills and that strategy doesn't work. Maybe you run into the Bengals and that strategy doesn't work. But you feel so good about your overall roster and your overall depth and how strong of an organization you are, you could commit to it. And Baltimore's going to be one of the best examples. The Bills did this for a few years. A 2-year window where the Bills thought, Kansas City's the only team better than us. We're going to beat them. We're going to do everything we can to make sure we're designed to beat specifically that team. And it didn't work for them. But if you're the Ravens, you might feel, and you have every right to, you might feel Lamar's better than Allen. Your defense is better than theirs. You've got better weapons, whatever the case, organizationally. And so you are going to see a Baltimore team that is going to start to, maybe they just double down on running and it doesn't look that much different, but you are going to see a commitment to beating Kansas City. But I think that will cost them a couple of regular season games, which is why at number 1, it's the Bengals. And this one I'm not going to spend too much time. I don't spend too much time on any of the division winners. And that's because most of the division winners, we know why. It's either best roster, best quarterback, best coach. We all know these things. But Burrow coming back, this is obviously, again, it's the most volatile division. Burrow could get hurt in week 4 and be out for the season, and none of this means shit. But if Burrow's back, Burrow is healthy, he's got his full complement of weapons because they didn't trade T. Higgins. Now, this might be their last year, being this team, and it almost undoubtedly will, because they're not going to re-sign Higgins. Even if the salary cap goes up, the Bengals have the poorest owner in the sport, and that's including the Packers, who don't have an owner. So they're probably not going to re-sign Higgins, which is fine. It is what it is. Maybe he's a future Denver Bronco. Who knows? Could have hope. But if Burrow is healthy, I fully subscribe to if Joe Burrow is healthy, that's the second best quarterback in football. If Joe Burrow is healthy, that team can get to a Super Bowl. If Joe Burrow, everything is on the table if Joe Burrow is healthy. So I don't think Cincinnati has outright a better roster than Baltimore, Cleveland, and the roster is probably more comparable to Pittsburgh, maybe slightly better because it's a little bit younger. But Joe is such a big difference maker compared to all the other guys. And like I said, I think Baltimore is going to try some things in the regular season to gear themselves up more for a postseason run against Kansas City than they're going to be necessarily concerned about winning the division. I think Joe is going to be on MVP watch. He's going to want to prove, again, he can come back after an injury, still be who he is. He still has Chase. He still has Higgins. And I think he's going to be on a mission. And because of the motivational factor, this might sound like a cop-out, I think Baltimore's playing for Kansas City. I think Cincinnati is playing for the regular season in respect and Burrow's personal pride. So I would go the Cincinnati Bengals 1, the Baltimore Ravens 2, the Cleveland Browns 3, and the Pittsburgh Steelers 4. And I could be totally wrong about all of that because this division would be flipped upside down. None of us really fucking know. With that being said, I appreciate everybody for listening, everybody for tuning in. This is the show that values time. I value mine. You should value yours. Don't forget to check out the other shows we have here on HardFoul Radio. Appreciate you guys.